Hi, I'm Stephanie Jaworski of joybaking.com. Today we're going to make a cinnamon swirl bread, and this is what it looks like. This bread is wonderfully soft and fluffy, and as you can see, it has a delicious swirl of cinnamon sugar. Really good, warm from the oven, some butter. Makes absolutely fantastic toast with either butter, maybe some marmalade, peanut butter, so many things. So, to begin, for this bread, I am going to make a pre-ferment. And really, what that is a starter, which is just a little bit of dough. What we need to do is make it the night before, and then it's going to chill in the refrigerator overnight, and then the next day we're going to add it to our bread dough. And the reason we do this, especially for a white bread, is it's going to add a lot of flavor. So what you will need, this is really easy to do. In a bowl, you will need 1 cup minus 1 tablespoon, which is 120 grams of unbleached bread flour. To that, I'm going to add just 1/4 teaspoon of SAF red instant yeast. Now, I really like to use instant yeast because there's no proofing. You just add it right to your dry ingredients. If you want to use active dry yeast, go to the joybaking.com website, and in the head note for this recipe, I will tell you what to do if you want to use active dry yeast. But I do recommend buying the instant. And then we will need 1/2 teaspoon, 2 grams of salt. I'm just gonna use my finger, clean hands. And then just kind of make a little well. And I'm going to add 1/3 cup, 80 milliliters, 80 grams of cold water. I like to use filtered water. And then really, we're just going to mix this together. You could use like a spoon. You could use your hands. I'm just using one of these dough scrapers. The important thing is to make sure that the flour is thoroughly moistened with the water. It's a stiff dough. So once I get kind of it, you could just keep stirring it, but what I like to do is just take a bench scraper and then just kind of go around this and just keep doing this until the flour is thoroughly moistened. Take a few minutes. Yeah, that looks good. Just gonna get my hands in there. And then just kind of pull it apart and feel it. Make sure there's no dry spots of the flour. That looks good. So then you want to take a small bowl, or if you had a container with a lid, you could do that. I'm just going to lightly oil it. I'm just using like vegetable oil. You could use canola, corn, even a light olive oil. And we do that so that our dough will not stick. So I put it in there like that, and then I just flip it over so there's some oil on top, cover it. Now I'm going to let it sit on the counter to proof for 1 hour. And then after that, I'm just going to put it into the refrigerator, just like this, overnight. So, 12 to 14 hours, something like that. I usually make it, around supper time, and then if I'm making the bread in the morning, that's good enough. So that's what I'm going to do, and then when we come back, we will make our bread dough. So now we are ready to make our bread dough. As I said, my pre-ferment has been in the refrigerator overnight, nice and cold. And so, to make your dough, if you have a stem mixer like I have, you need your dough hook. The first thing you will need is 1 cup, 240 milliliters or 240 grams of icy cold water. And my water's for reference, is at 50 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 10 degrees Celsius. And you would say, why would you use such cold water? The reason is we're going to knead the dough for quite a while. And when you knead the dough, it warms it up. And what we want is our finished dough to be around room temperature, around 75 degrees Fahrenheit with 24°C. So that's why we start with cold water, because that kneading really heats up your dough. So just put that right in there. And then I'm going to take my pre-ferment straight from the fridge so it's nice and cold. And then I'm just going to cut it into smaller pieces. Just put it in there. You know, white bread, like this is just your white type of sandwich bread. Typically, you know, it doesn't have, it's not as flavorful as, say, a multigrain or something like that. So that's why adding a pre-ferment or a starter is a really good idea, because it really bumps up the flavor of your bread. So just dump that right in there. And then for our dry ingredients, I'm going to put it all together in a separate bowl here. I have 2 3/4 cups, 355 grams of unbleached bread flour, and then I'm just adding 1/4 cup, 35 grams of unbleached all-purpose flour. That's going to make it a little softer, but just a little. And then 1½ tablespoons, 20 grams of granulated white sugar. We need a little bit of sweetness in our white bread. And then a scant 1/4 cup, 20 grams. I'm using dried milk powder. And I'm using that for a few reasons. One, it helps to color the crust, that beautiful golden brown. And it helps to make our bread nice and moist, which then acts as a preservative and keeps the bread fresher longer. And then I'm adding 1 3/4 teaspoons, 7 grams of salt. I like to use a fine kosher salt. And for our yeast, I'm adding 1 teaspoon, which is about 3.5 grams of, again, the SAF. You could use, I'm using red, but you could even use gold instant yeast. And that's our dry. I'm just gonna, you can just stir it together. I got a whisk, but you just, with a spoon, your hand, just kind of roughly mix it together. And just dump that right in there. So now, to knead our dough, put the dough hook, we are going to, you need to set your timer, 5 minutes on first speed, and that way we're going to get everything all mixed together. And then you're going to go up to second speed for between 4 to 6 minutes, and that's going to start to develop your dough, the gluten. And what you're looking for at the end is the dough will clean the bowl, so your bowl's going to be nice and clean. It will feel smooth, elastic, and just a little sticky, but I'll show you that when we get there. So 5 minutes at first speed, and then 4 to 6 on second. That would depend on your mixer. So we're going to start. Okay, so it's been the time I said. Looks pretty good. The bowl's clean, smooth, it's very elastic, and just a little sticky. So now what we're going to do is what's called the window pane test. That way we can double check that our bread dough is kneaded enough. So what you want to do is just wet your hands. Get a small piece of dough and then take your dough and gently pull it. Don't just move your way around. And what we want to do is nice stretchy dough. If if you're pulling it and it rips, that's telling you that you should knead it a little longer. If you can stretch it like this and it doesn't tear, then your dough is developed enough, which nice and strong. For a white bread like this, we want a pretty strong dough, so there, yeah, I'm happy with that. Like I said, if it tears, just maybe knead it for another minute and then check it. So now what we're going to do is add 3 tablespoons, 42 grams of unsalted butter, and have your butter soft. Mine's pretty soft here. And just going to add that. And we're going to beat it in on second speed for 3-4 minutes. And again, until your bowl's clean and it's nice and smooth and elastic. Okay, I think we're done. Again, let's clean the sides of the bowl. It's nice and smooth, elastic, just a little sticky. Again, you could do that window pane test, same sort of thing. Pull it. If it rips, then knead it a little more. If it's, I've already done that, so I'll show you again. I'm just going to check the temperature of the dough. It's about 78, which is Fahrenheit 26C. So that's about right. So as you can see, that was with that really icy cold water because we did knead it a long time and it warms it up. So now, you want a bowl. Again, oil your bowl so the dough doesn't stick to it. You only need a light coating because, I don't think I mentioned it, we added butter, so that makes our dough. That's the reason we add that is going to make the bread really rich and it adds tenderness to the dough. So good. So just take it, put it in your bowl, get the rest of that. And then, again, we want to flip it over so that there's a light coating of oil on the top, so we don't want it to dry out as it proves. And then I'm just going to cover it with some plastic wrap. And we're going to let it proof, sit at room temperature. Room temperature is about 75 Fahrenheit, 24C for 1 hour. And that'll kind of relax the gluten in the flour and it will rise a bit. So that's what we're going to do. And then when we come back, we will carry on. So it's been about an hour of proofing of our dough. So we are ready to roll it out. But first, you will need an 8.5 by 4.5 inch, which is 21.5 by 11.5 centimeter loaf pan. And then I'm just going to spray it. You could lightly oil it as well. Okay. And then for our filling, that wonderful cinnamon sugar, you will need in a small bowl 1/3 cup, 65 grams of granulated white sugar. To that, I'm going to add 2 teaspoons, 4 grams of ground cinnamon. I like a really nice cinnamon flavor in my bread. And then I'm just adding 1 teaspoon, about 4 grams of flour. You could use either bread or all-purpose. That's just going to bind things together. And stir that. Okay. Oh, smells wonderful. Hungry already. And then, before I sprinkle on the filling, I'm going to brush the dough with an egg wash. So I have 1 large egg at room temperature, that's about 50 grams. And I'm going to add 1 tablespoon, either like a cream or a milk. If you didn't have either, you could add water. And just whisk that together. Okay. And now got a bread dough, you need a rolling pin and a ruler is a good thing, and some flour. We're going to roll our dough out to about 20 inches by just a little shy of the 8-inch wide, which would be 45 by 20 centimeters. Sure. If you make this once and you go, oh, I'd like to make double the amount, you could just double the recipe and make 2 loaves because this freezes really well. So I often do that if I want to, make a little extra. Since you're spending the time doing this, why not make double? So just kind of pat it down. Oh. And when you're rolling, lift it up, periodically if you have to flour underneath or on top. Like I said, a ruler's kind of handy, or especially your first time. After that, you might be able to just eyeball it, but just do this and let it spring back if it needs to. Okay, always like kind of roll your hand, try to have it an even thickness. So I'm happy with that. Now take a pastry brush and brush the top surface. Like I said, this is going to act like a glue for our filling. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to save this egg wash, and then I'm going to brush the top of our bread before we put it into the oven. Gives it a nice shine. Okay. And then, now leave a little bit of a border down here, and don't put your cinnamon sugar because we're going to have to seal the bread. So you don't want to have the cinnamon sugar on there. And once you put on, just kind of pat it down so it kind of adheres to the dough. Yum, yum, yum. Okay, there we go. And then I'm just going to pat it down. I love making this. You know, when I was growing up, my mom would buy raisin swirl bread every once in a while, and it was a real treat. So I'm so excited now that I started making my own. I can make it anytime I want. It still seems like a treat though. So now what I'm going to do is start at this end. If you see, whoop, I have a little edge there, and then we're just going to roll it up. And then, maybe I can turn this so you can see what I'm doing. I'm going to go to the end, and then I'm just going to kind of take it down, just pinch it to seal it all the way. And then I also want to seal the sides, so I'm just going to, I should do it this way, pinch it as well. So the filling, you don't want that filling to fall out. And I'll just make sure, pinch that on the bottom. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my ruler, because my pan is just a little over 8 inches, 20 centimeters. So just kind of squish it down to that. And then that seam here, I want that on the bottom of my loaf pan. So I just want to make sure I'm going to put that this way down. And it just fits like that. And then I'm going to spray my paper just so it doesn't stick, because we're going to proof it. And it will rise. You want it to rise about 1 inch above the pan, so about 2.5 centimeters. So that's why I sprayed my plastic wrap so it doesn't stick. So we're going to just let it sit room temperature about 1 hour to 1 hour and a quarter, or until it's 1 inch above. And then when we come back, we will bake it off. So our cinnamon swirl bread is ready to be baked off. So you want to preheat your oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 180 degrees Celsius. I've already done that. As you can see, it's proofed. It's risen about 1 inch above the pan. It's about 2.5 centimeters. So I'm just going to lightly brush it with some of that leftover egg wash. It's really light. And then to bake it, Everyone's oven is a little different, like I always say, because it is. I'm going to say between 30 and 40 minutes. I do like to rotate my pan front to back about halfway through to get even baking. So what you're going to look for, you will get what is called oven spring, which means it will rise a bit and it will turn a beautiful golden brown. If you find it over browning, depending on your oven, you can just put some foil tinted over the top to prevent it to get too brown. And if you tap it, it'll sound hollow. So I'm going to say 30 to 40 minutes. Okay, so our raisin swirl bread is done. Doesn't it look wonderful? So put your pan on a wire rack. If I tap it, it sounds hollow. If you want, if it's the first time and you're not sure whether it's done, if you have some kind of probe thermometer, you could insert it, and the internal temperature should read 190 degrees Fahrenheit, which is about 88 Celsius, if you want to make doubly sure. So as you can see, it did rise a little more. Beautiful golden brown. I'm happy with it. So I'm going to let it cool maybe about 5 minutes and then you can just, see if you have to loosen it, but you can just usually lift it or tilt it out. Now, if you prefer your bread to have a softer outer crust, what you could do at this point is just brush it with some melted butter. Just maybe melt about a tablespoon, about 14 grams of butter, and then just brush the top with that. But I prefer it just like that. And then once you get out of the pan, you want to let it cool down to room temperature. Otherwise, it's hard to slice. So that's what I'm going to do. And then when we come back, we will try it. So our cinnamon swirl bread has cooled down to room temperature. So let's slice it. Oh, doesn't that look wonderful? Get that nice spiral. Give it another slice. There we go. Now I'm not going to, but I like it with a nice coating of butter on there, but I will just taste it. Gotta have a little bit of cinnamon. I don't know about you, but when I eat cinnamon swirl bread, I kind of unswirl it, I guess. Oh. I think it's just the right amount of the cinnamon sugar to the white bread. Not overly sweet, just enough. It's a very delicious bread. Really, I like it with butter. I don't know why, but I like it with a slice of cheese. It is great toast with, like I think I've said, marmalade, peanut butter, some cheese. You can make French toast with it. It freezes really well. But like I said, you could double the recipe and make 2 loaves because it freezes so well. But you must try it. And until next time, I'm Stephanie Jaworski of joybaking.com.